In his letter to the Israelites living in the city of Corinth, Shaul or Paul wrote, "For this cause ought the woman to have power on her head because of the messengers or angels." What did Shaul mean by this phrase, because of the angels? First Corinthians chapter 11. For a man indeed ought not to cover his head, forasmuch as he is the image and esteem of Elohim, but the woman is the esteem of the man. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Neither was the man created for the woman, but the woman for the man. For this cause ought the woman to have power on her head because of the angels. As we saw in the previous video about head covering, the word cover is katakalupto, which means to cover the head from the top flowing down with a veil. When we look at verse 10, for this cause ought the woman to have power on her head because of the messengers or angels, the word cause comes from the Greek ophe elo, which means to owe, to be under obligation, be bound, due, need, duty. So Shaul is saying that because the wife, the woman, was created for the man, the wife owes it to her husband. It is her duty to her husband to cover her head with a veil, to have power on her head because of the messengers or the angels. This is a wife's duty, according to Shaul. So let's look at that word power. That comes from the Greek exousia. Exousia means power of choice, liberty, power of authority, right, power of rule, force, capacity, mastery, influence, authority. So that veil that the woman wears is that authority of her husband. The veil is the physical representation of the authority of the man over the woman. Why is it important for the woman to have a physical representation of the man's authority on her head? Bereshit, chapter 6. And it came to pass that when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of Elohim saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Verse 4. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of Elohim came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So we see this history recorded by the prophet Moshe, about a time when the sons of Elohim came unto the daughters of men. And it says fair. Fair doesn't mean, as we use it in modern context, of meaning light-skinned. That word fair is translated from the Hebrew tob, which means good. Enoch chapter 6. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the Malachim, or angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. In ancient Shemitic culture, this was an understanding that these divine beings came down to earth and intermarried with human women. And this is certainly what was believed among the Israelites of the first century. This is a history that is shied away from in modern theology, in modern Christianity, but this is what the ancient Hebrews believed. Yehuda, or Jude, verse 6. And the messengers, or angels, which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he has reserved in everlasting chains, under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. Antiquities of the Jews, the history of Flavius Josephus. For many messengers or angels of Elohim accompanied with women and begat sons that proved unjust and despisers of all that was good, on account of the confidence that they had in their own strength. For the tradition is that these men did what resembled the acts of those whom the Grecians call giants. So we see the historian Josephus from the 1st century AD also describes this understanding that the Israelites had of this history. In fact, the book of Enoch goes into much detail about this issue. It talks about these giants that were produced by these intermarriages when they were judged and destroyed, that they became unclean spirits that roamed the earth. 2 Corinthians chapter 11. For I am jealous over you with a pious jealousy, for I have espoused you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Mashiach. But I fear, lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Hawa, or Eve, through his subtlety, so your minds should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Mashiach. 1 Timothy chapter 2. For Adam was first formed, then Hawa, or Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman being deceived was in the transgression. So we have the concept that our mother Hawa was deceived by the serpent, and this is a trait that is considered common among women in Hebraic thought. Women are more susceptible to being deceived by evil spirits. The idea is that these fallen messengers, these fallen angels, or even unclean spirits will more likely attach themselves to women than to men, because women are more emotional and men are more logical. In Bantu culture, we have this concept of a spirit husband, where a particular spirit becomes enamored with a human female and attaches itself to that female and directs that female's behavior, even causing that female to dress in a way and behave in a way that is pleasing to that spirit. We continue this idea that was among the Israelites. In the book of Tobit, also known as the book of Tobias or Tobiahu, or the book of Tobi, is the third or early 2nd century BC work describing how Alim tests the faithful, responds to prayers, and protects the covenant community, that is, the Israelites. It tells the story of two Israelite families, that of the blind Tobit in Nineveh and of the abandoned Sarah in Ecbatana. Tobit's son, Tobiahu, is sent to retrieve 10 silver talents that Tobit once left in Rages, a town of Media. Guided and aided by the angel Raphael, he arrives in Ecbatana, where he meets Sarah. A demon named Asmodeus has fallen in love with her and kills anyone she intends to marry. But with the aid of Raphael, the demon is exorcised and Tobiahu and Sarah marry, after which they return to Nineveh, where Tobit is cured of his blindness. So the story told in the book of Tobit happens in the 8th century BC. Scholars conclude that the story was actually written in the 3rd or early 2nd century BC. So this is at least 200 years before the time of the ministry of Yahushua HaMashiach. We see that this idea of an unclean spirit becoming infatuated with a human woman is among the Israelites. Tobit chapter 6. Then the young man answered the Malach, or angel, I have heard, brother Azaryahu, that this maid has been given to 7 men who all died in the marriage chamber. And now I am the only son of my father, and I am afraid, lest if I go in unto her, I die, as the other before. For a wicked spirit loves her, which hurts nobody, but those which come unto her. Wherefore I also fear lest I die, and bring my father's and my mother's life because of me to the grave with sorrow, for they have no other son to bury them. So the story doesn't go into how this situation between Sarah and this unclean spirit was actually initiated, but it does describe this belief among the Hebrew people. And of course, not all sects of Israelites believed in this kind of thing. When we look at the beliefs of the Zadokim or the Sadducees did not believe in resurrection, they did not believe in angels or spirits. However, whether a person takes the books of the Apocrypha to be meaningful or not, they do attest to the fact that the ancient Israelites did believe in this type of idea. So when we discuss Shaul or Paul's letter, where he wrote that women ought to veil themselves, put veils on their heads because of the Malachim, because of the angels, the idea is that the woman is to veil or hide her beauty, because not only do men look at women, but there are other creatures, other beings that look and are attracted to women. The following is a clip explaining the same concept from a Muslim perspective.
Jinn possess people for 3 main reasons. Number 1, out of love. So jinn, they fall in love with people. And this is extremely important for our sisters especially. So for example, you're leaving the house and you're not wearing the correct hijab. You're not properly covered. Or you are wearing a lot of makeup and you have beautified yourself and you're leaving the home. Then don't forget that there are other creations besides men. There are men who are going to look at you. But at the same time, a jinn may fall in love with you. And this is something very, very common. I had a case where a jinn had possessed a sister. She was waiting at the bus stop and the jinn fell in love with her. She was walking through a park and the jinn followed her. She was waiting at the bus stop and the jinn fell in love with her and it actually possessed her. And when they fought...
Kefa Aleph for 1 Peter chapter 3. Likewise, you husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge, giving honor unto the wife as unto the weaker vessel, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. So again, we see from Kefa that the husbands need to deal with their wives according to knowledge. Where does knowledge come from? Knowledge comes from the Torah, giving honor unto the wife. Remember that the wife ought to have a sign of power on her head, so that honor is that veil. One of the husband's responsibilities is to clothe his wife. You see that again, the woman is considered the weaker vessel. The woman is more susceptible to demonic attachments and attacks. That your prayers be not hindered. Again, this idea of being properly dressed in prayer. We go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 11. But every woman that prays or prophesies with her head uncovered or unveiled dishonors her head, that being her husband, for that is even all one as if she were shaven. Verse 10, for this cause ought the woman to have power on her head because of the Malachim, or the angels. So this is not something that only Paul referred to. We see that Kefa or Peter referred to it as well. And again, this is not something that they invented. This is a very common idea in ancient Hebraic culture. 1 Timothy chapter 2. In like manner also the women adorn themselves in modest apparel, with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with broided hair, or gold, or pearls, or costly array, but which becomes women professing piety with good works. 1 Peter chapter 3, whose adorning let it not be the outward adorning of plaiting the hair, and of wearing of gold, or of putting on of apparel, but let it be the hidden man of the heart, in that which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit, which is in the sight of Elohim a great price. For after this manner in the old time the set apart women also, who trusted in Elohim, adorned themselves, being in subjection unto their own husbands. So we see that the modest apparel and the modest behavior are both required of a set-apart woman. We understand that the writers of these letters to the assemblies were Hebrews, and they were speaking according to Hebraic culture. So this is not modesty in the side of 21st century Western ideology, but they were speaking according to the ancient Israelite culture. Matthew chapter 5. You have heard that it was said by them of old time, you shall not commit adultery. And I say unto you, that whosoever looks on a woman to lust after her has committed adultery with her already in his heart. And that word woman is from the Greek gune, which means a woman, a wife. So a man who looks at a married woman to desire her, to lust after her beauty, has already committed adultery in his heart. When we look at what the Torah says about adultery, it instructs us that the adulterer and the adulteress are guilty. Now, if a man is attracted to another man's wife, particularly because of the reason of her not being properly dressed, now it's an issue that she also is to blame in that man's desire, that man's adultery in his heart. I want to read an excerpt from this article from Russia Beyond entitled, "Why Do Women Cover Their Heads in Orthodox Churches?" This Orthodox tradition traces back to the legacy of Paul the Apostle, and while most of the world's Christians no longer do it, the Russian Orthodox Church still insists on it. If you were raised in the Orthodox tradition in Russia and were visiting Orthodox churches once in a while, even back in your childhood, there is one thing that would definitely shock you after stepping into a Catholic or Protestant church. Say when on a trip to Europe, women freely walk into those churches bareheaded. In the Orthodox tradition, this is a big no-no. Of course, no one would kick a bareheaded woman out of an Orthodox church should she walk in, but she is very likely to face some disapproving and judging looks. The reason is simple. In an Orthodox church, a woman should wear a headscarf. But why? Historically, it was appropriate to make all Christian women put scarves on their heads, as the tradition was born during quite ancient times. In the 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul the Apostle says, "Every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. It is the same as having her head shaved." And in the first century, shaved heads for women were frowned upon. Russian theologian Sergei Kudiev clarifies Paul's words. In the antique culture, hair was considered the most colorful element of woman's beauty, and covering it showed one's modesty. Greek hetairai courtesans walked bareheaded, while the family women covered their heads, showing their loyalty to the husband. Thus, with Paul's disdain, the tradition was secured. Modest women, that is, God-fearing Christians, should cover their heads. The Russian Orthodox Church maintains the ancient practice of women wearing head covers when they attend church service. We find this practice in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church as well. The style of Ethiopian women's headscarves is similar to the veils that were worn by ancient Israelite women. Like ancient Israelite women, traditionally this was the everyday dress of Ethiopian women, not just when they went to church. There is the misconception that Paul meant that women only need to cover their heads when they attend assembly or pray. They cover their heads in church and then change back into modern European clothing. However, the veil was an everyday article of clothing for Israelite women. In fact, an Israelite woman would not have been considered fully clothed without a veil in public. When we talk about going back to the ancient path, returning to the ways of our righteous ancestors, we have to understand that culture involves all facets of life. It involves our faith, it involves the way that we eat, the way that we live, the way that we dress, the way that we speak. So when we come to this idea of what is the proper way for an Israelite to dress according to the desires of the Most High, we really need to understand what was the culture of fashion that Yahuwah gave to our ancestors. What clothing is the clothing that is pleasing to Him? We want to be pleasing to our Creator. We want to follow in the same footsteps of our righteous fathers, of our righteous mothers, those that Yahuwah called his friends, those that Yahuwah called set apart. Fear Elohim and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Bind up the testimony, seal the Torah among my disciples. Shalom, family. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the subscribe button. Like, comment, and share.